I recently replaced the suspension on my 2017 Toyota 4Runner and my 2016 Toyota Tacoma. On the 4Runner, I went with a set of Bilstein 5100 shocks, and on the Tacoma, I went with the Icon Stage 2 setup. In today's video, I want to compare those two options. A quick summary of what I've got going on with each of the two vehicles. On the 4Runner, the Bilstein 5100s, on the 5100s, you've got a number of clip settings for raising the height. We're sitting at the first clip up from stock height, which gives us about 0.85 inches of lift. And then I've got the Goodyear Wrangler Ultra Train AT tires. These are the stock tire size in an LT 265/70 R17. And then I've got the FN FX Pro wheels with the stainless steel TRD center cap. At the rear of the vehicle, again, I replaced the shocks with the Bilstein 5100s, but it's actually sitting at the stock height. This essentially levels out the vehicle. Then on the Tacoma, we've got the Icon Stage 2 setup. At the front, the shock is lifted about 2¼ inches, and then we've got the Goodyear Wrangler DuraTrack tires. These are an LT 285/70 R17, slightly oversized. Then we've got the VTX Rogue wheels in 17 inches. At the back of the truck, this setup comes with an Adelphi, raises the vehicle about 1.5 inches in theory. I didn't get that full 1.5 inches of lift, and so I combined it with a 1-inch Toytec block. So I've got the Adelphi, the block, and then of course the shock replacement. So starting off with price, the Icon Stage 2 setup is significantly more expensive than the Bilstein 5100s. I'll put a link in the description below to both of these products on bilsteinlifts.com. The Icon setup is got an MSRP of $2,045, so very expensive. It's a complete lift kit though. It includes the front coilover, and then at the back you get the Adelphi and the shocks. As I mentioned before, I had to combine in the Toytec block, which is another $100, or at least it was back when I bought it, maybe cheaper now. I'll put a link to that in the description as well. And then the other thing is that with the Icon setup, to actually adjust the height at the front of the vehicle, you have to have a spanner wrench, which is another $40. So it actually, in total, runs you about $2,095 if you pay the full MSRP price. Very spendy. The Bilstein 5100s, on the other hand, run about $446, so very reasonably priced. One of the things that allows this setup to be more cost effective is that you actually reuse the coil springs at the front of the vehicle. So you've got to compress down the coil spring, remove the old shock, install the new one. Allows you to save some costs because you're not buying those coils again. And then at the back of the vehicle, again, if you wanted to lift it, you're going to have to pay more for that. So for example, if you put the Bilstein 5100s on the Tacoma, you would need to add in either an Adelphi or a block, which again, we got the Adelphi with this install. And then if you're putting it on a 4Runner, you're going to need to replace either the coils that are in the back or add a spacer. So that's going to have a slight additional cost, although it's pretty insignificant, especially given the fact that at $446 compared to $2,095, we're talking about 4 times the price. So in this department, Bilstein 5100s are definitely a more economical option. Now, both the Bilsteins and the Icons are sold as being bolt-on solutions, no cutting or welding required. I found that to be true with the Bilstein 5100s, not true with the Icon Stage 2 kit. Now at the front it is true. We've got this front assembly. You'll see that all the bolts in this shock line up with this upper shock mount. Very simple in that sense to install this. At the back of the vehicle, it gets quite a bit more complicated, and there's a few reasons for that. First of all, you'll see we've got this external reservoir here with this hose that cuts back here. This external reservoir is bolted into the frame. So for starters, I had to bolt through the frame to attach this. Then you'll see on this upper shock mount, because of this hose that's cutting through, I had to trim the upper shock mount to get us clearance for that. And then down below on the leaf pack, you'll see that we've got these little clips. At the back, it's a little bit tricky to try to show on camera. I had to cut off one of those clips, and then there's a rivet going through the leaf pack that I had to basically grind down, sand, repaint before installing the new Adelphi kit. Now if I were to go with Icon shocks again, I'd definitely go with the Stage 1 kit instead of the Stage 2. With that, it doesn't have this external reservoir, so we don't have to bolt through the frame, we don't have to grind down the upper shock mount, and then it doesn't include an Adelphi. And the Icon Adelphi requires you to cut off this old clip and remove that rivet. On a lot of other Adelith kits that isn't required. So I could have gone with a different product or just use a block, and none of that would have been needed. Now the Bilstein 5100s on the other hand are a complete bolt-on solution, but you're going to find that at the front of the vehicle it's a lot more complicated than with the Icon setup. With the Icon setup we just remove the old shock assembly and put the new one in. With the Bilstein 5100s we've got to rebuild the whole assembly. So we've got to take out the old shock assembly, we've got to compress down the coil springs with a spring compressor, then we've got to disassemble the whole assembly, put the new shock in, rebuild it, and then release the pressure in that coil, and then put it back into the vehicle. So there's some additional steps involved. If you've done any research on this, it can sound a little bit scary. Coil springs can be very dangerous to work with, and it sounds very complicated to have to rebuild the whole assembly. But after I did it, I found it really wasn't all that complicated. I was very scared about it at first, and I wouldn't say that I'm super mechanically inclined. Having done it again, I would have no hesitation doing it a second time. Plus, now that I've done it, it would be very fast to do it again. So if you're thinking about the Bilstein 5100s, you're nervous about dealing with the front coilovers, I would urge you to give it a try. It's really not all that bad. And then at the back of the vehicle, super simple install back here. Of course, I didn't lift it, so that took a step out of the process. But even if you were going to lift it, not all that complicated. Again, much simpler than what we had to deal with the Icon setup here. Now, both times when I lifted the Tacoma and the 4Runner, I did a ton of research looking at various blogs, YouTube videos, Instagram, all kinds of groups, trying to figure out what it was going to look like lifting each vehicle to various heights with different tire configurations, with different wheel configurations. And it's a very daunting task. And you don't really know what it's going to look like until everything is done, installation is complete. And at that point, it's a little bit hard to try to change things. Now, it's nice when you've got a kit that does give you some added flexibility to adjust slightly once everything is done. With the Bilstein 5100s, that's going to be very difficult to do. I already mentioned that we had to rebuild the whole shock assembly. When you're rebuilding that assembly, you've got to decide what height you're going to put it at. So once you're done with the installation, if you want to change the height, either raising or lowering it, you're going to have to basically redo all the steps again. You're going to have to remove the whole assembly. You're going to have to compress those coils again, rebuild it. Very complicated task, not something you're going to want to do once you finish the project. At the back of the vehicle, no matter what assembly you go with, there's not going to be a whole lot of adjustability in that. Whether you're going with a 4Runner, a block, or new coils, likewise on the Tacoma, an Adelith or a block, it is what it is. You're not going to be able to adjust that all that much. But with the Icon setup at the front, it's actually very easy to raise and lower the vehicle once the kit's been installed. Actually, because I didn't buy the spanner wrench when I first got it, I didn't realize that I would need to have that to actually adjust the height. I did the whole installation, basically left it at stock height, and then when I got the spanner wrench, then I lifted it. So this was a really cool feature because, again, once the whole shock is installed, you can adjust it to raise or lower it. Now you're going to have to get an alignment done either way once you're done, so it's not like you're going to adjust it on a regular basis, but it's really nice because, again, once it's installed, you can put it to the height that you think you need. In my case, once I got the 285s on, realized that I actually needed a little bit more height, and so I adjusted slightly further to give myself some more height, and really nice to be able to do that. Likewise, I didn't install the block at the rear originally, so I went back and installed that after the fact. It's nice that you could go put that block back in. Again, lifting the rear of either vehicle is a lot easier than the front. You could go make those changes and then easily change the front as well. Now, in order to adjust this, we've got basically little screw. I'm trying to remember now, actually. I think it's right here. You just loosen that, and then this whole assembly right here just spins to raise the height. And you'll see that this right here basically threads of a giant bolt. So that, as this spins, either increases or decreases as you're raising or lowering the vehicle. So if I were to do a lift kit again in the future, it would be very appealing to go with a kit like this, where you've got that ability to adjust the height after the kit's installed, rather than the Bilstein 5100s. Again, this comes down to kind of that budget equation. Bilstein 5100s are a lot more cost effective. Reason for that is that it's a simpler overall setup. So in this area, the Icons really do have an advantage. Now, beyond the appearance differences that we get with lifting the vehicle, the main reason that you replace shocks is to improve performance, and that would include ride quality on pavement, off-road, and then travel. And with the Icon setup, it is sold as being a setup for a very serious driver for maximizing performance, resulting in maximum performance on asphalt, off-road, and maximum damping ability. And I've got to say, I haven't been that impressed with the ride quality with this setup. Now again, it's a little bit on the stiffer side, and what I've found is that when I hit a really harsh bump in the road, whether that's like a rock or a pothole, the jarring that you get from that just resonates through the entire cabin. It's really harsh in that sense. I will say that I just got back from about a 1,000-mile road trip. I did a lot of driving on washboard roads at high speeds, and I was very impressed with the setup from that standpoint. It really absorbed that very well. So I'd say it's very specific to your driving situation. But in terms of just driving on like really bad bumpy roads, I felt like it was a little bit on the harsher side from what I would like. The other thing that we do get with the Icon setup is that at the rear of the vehicle, it's got this external reservoir. That should increase the performance of this rear shock over time because you've got more fluid, allows the shock to stay cooler, maximizing that damping ability. And then also because we've got the external reservoir, it allows the damping between the front and the rear of the vehicle to match a little bit more closely. But overall, definitely a pretty harsh ride in my opinion. I do have a number of viewers with a very similar setup that have said that they disagree, that they feel like it resulted in a really nice improvement in ride. So it's definitely subjective at some level, but my experience is that it's much harsher. Now from a travel standpoint, I have been very impressed with this setup. Really nice improvement over the travel that I had with the stock Bilstein shocks that came on the Tacoma. Now the 4Runner on the other hand, really impressed with the change that I get with the Bilstein 5100s. One thing that's very characteristic about these is that they've got very soft shocks. So when you're braking really hard, you get this nosedive where the front of the vehicle kind of dips down. So it's a very soft shock in that sense. Likewise, when you're driving at like highway speeds, it's got a very floaty feeling where you just kind of feel like you're, I don't know, just car sick. Vehicles just kind of floating around on the highway. So getting a stiffer shock setup on this is a massive improvement. Again, the Tacoma, I felt like it was just fine before. The handling was good before, ride quality was great, and so going with a stiffer setup is just kind of painful in certain situations, whereas with the 4Runner it was painfully soft. Going with a stiffer setup is actually a good improvement. So very impressed with the performance change that we get in terms of ride quality. It's much stiffer in a good way, and then we also see a really nice improvement in travel with the Bilstein 5100s compared with those stock shocks. Lastly, I'll talk about quality real quick, and I will say that the Icons have the edge in this department. Again, you would expect that with the price differential. Bilstein 5100s are still a pretty high quality product, but there are a few things about them they don't have the same high quality feel that we get with the Icon setup. One thing I wasn't that impressed with on this setup is that the dust covers that came with the shocks are just plastic, and they have this really cheap look and feel to them. I actually took the dust covers off because I didn't even think you know, that they were worth putting on the vehicle because they were so chintzy. Since I put them on, I've had a few viewers say, hey, why don't you have your dust covers on? You should definitely have them. So it's probably a mistake, but again, now that it's in there, I'm a little reluctant to try to go back and put the dust covers on now. The Icon setup, on the other hand, just has a really high quality look and feel to it. You can see looking at the front coilover assembly, it just, you know, looks really high end. Again, we've got the ability to adjust the height here. I'd say that long term, this shock is probably going to last a little bit longer than the Bilsteins would. And then of course, because this has that external reservoir, you know, it's a more premium product in that sense too. Again, it's going to be able to match the damping at the front of the vehicle better, help keep the shock cooler overall, and just in general, you know, comparing the two products, the Icons do seem to have the edge in terms of overall quality, but the Bilsteins aren't all that bad either. So in summary, you can probably tell that I'm more impressed with the Bilstein 5100 shocks than the Icon Stage 2 setup. And it's not to say that I'm disappointed with the Icons. To the contrary, they've been just fine. But when you're spending 4 times as much on a product, you just expect it to be a superior product. And I haven't been impressed at that level when compared with the Bilstein 5100. So, you know, it really speaks a lot to the quality of Bilstein 5100s. No question why so many Toyota owners out there run Bilstein 5100s. They really are a great product and very economical. You know, There are reasons to go with higher quality products, but I'd say that 99% of the time, the Bilstein 5100s are gonna meet your needs. I'm sure there are many of you out there that have different opinions on this. If you guys have owned either of these products, and even better, if you've owned both of them, love to get your feedback in the comments below. For more videos on the 3rd generation Tacoma and the 5th generation 4Runner, be sure to subscribe. In the meantime, thanks for watching.